HOA Karen tried to shut down my farm, but she had no idea what she was walking into. It all began on a bright morning when I was out in the orchard checking on the apple trees. The branches were heavy with fruit, and the smell of fresh earth filled the air. It was my pride, my land, my work, and my heritage. That was when Karen stormed in with her clipboard and her sharp voice. She marched down the dirt path like she owned the place. Her eyes narrowed as if every leaf on my trees was some kind of crime. "This farm is a violation," she declared. "Your animals are too loud. Your crops are too messy. And worst of all, you are lowering the value of our community." I stood there silent for a moment, just watching her. The sun was behind me, and she squinted, trying to meet my eyes. She thought I was just another farmer, someone who would bow down and obey. But what she did not know was that this farm was more than land. It was protected by generations of hard work. It was connected to people in high places. And it was tied to a name she did not recognize yet. Karen waved her phone around, threatening to call the cops and the board. She snapped pictures of the barns, the tractors, even the chickens that wandered too close. She grinned like she had already won, as if she could erase me with a complaint. The neighbors began to gather at the fence, curious about the commotion. Some shook their heads, others whispered, knowing Karen had gone too far this time. I just kept calm, waiting, letting her dig her own hole. She ranted louder about how she would make sure this farm was shut down. She shouted about her connections, her power, her control. But what she did not realize was that her words meant nothing compared to the truth. I finally spoke slowly, clearly. "This farm is not under your authority. This land is older than your neighborhood, older than the association you claim to represent." Karen froze for a second, then laughed, as if I was joking. But the look on her face changed when she noticed the truck pulling up the driveway. A black vehicle, polished and official, with an emblem she did not recognize. The man who stepped out wore a suit, not a farmer's shirt, and not a neighbor's clothes. The crowd grew quiet. Karen's voice trailed off. Her face shifted from smug to pale. The truth she had ignored was now standing right in front of her. And for the first time, Karen had nothing to say. The man in the suit walked calmly down the path toward us. His steps were steady and confident, and the silence around him grew heavy. Karen tried to straighten herself, but her voice cracked when she spoke. "And who exactly are you?" she asked. Her words sounded smaller than before. The neighbors leaned in, curious, their eyes wide with anticipation. The man did not answer right away. He looked at me, first gave a nod, as if we shared an unspoken understanding. Then he turned his gaze to Karen, and his tone was firm. "This land is protected," he said. "It belongs to a family that has worked it for generations. No one, not even a neighborhood association, has the authority to interfere here." Karen blinked, her mouth opening and closing as if her thoughts could not catch up with her pride. She stammered, trying to find her usual sharpness, but it was gone. The neighbors whispered among themselves, some smiling, knowing her reign was slipping. I crossed my arms, quietly watching her struggle. Karen pointed at me with her trembling hand. "He is just a farmer," she shouted, desperate to regain control. "He should follow the rules like everyone else." The man in the suit gave her a long look. "Do you even know who you are speaking to?" he asked. Karen frowned, shaking her head. That is when the weight of the truth began to sink into the air. The farm was not only mine. It was tied to history and to influence that Karen had never even imagined. The soil beneath our feet carried more power than her clipboard ever could. Karen shifted uncomfortably, but still tried to stand tall. "I will take this to the board," she insisted, her voice weaker now. But deep down, she was beginning to realize she had already lost. The man in the suit stepped closer, and his shadow stretched across the dirt between them. Karen backed up slightly, but forced a stiff smile, as if she still had control. The neighbors pressed closer to the fence, holding their breath. "This board you speak of," he said calmly, "has no power here. This land is registered under a charter older than your association. Every inch of it has legal protections that you clearly do not understand." Karen swallowed hard, her lips twitching with frustration. She waved her clipboard in the air as if the papers inside could shield her from the truth. But her voice trembled when she spoke again. "There must be some mistake," she said. Rules are rules, and this farm is too disruptive for the community. I will not let this continue. I finally stepped forward, my boots crunching against the gravel. Karen flinched slightly as I stopped just a few feet from her. The orchard stretched behind me, rows upon rows of thriving trees glistening in the sunlight. Karen, I said softly but firmly, this farm feeds hundreds of families. This land produces more than you can imagine. And I am not just a farmer who you think you can push around. Her eyes darted from me to the man in the suit and then to the neighbors. For the first time, she seemed unsure of herself. The smugness that once fueled her words had drained away, replaced by silence. The man in the suit pulled a document from his briefcase. He unfolded it slowly and held it in front of Karen. "This is the original deed," he said. "Signed decades before your association even existed." Karen leaned forward, squinting at the paper. Her face turned pale as she realized what it meant. The neighbors murmured louder now, some even chuckling under their breath. She tried to speak, but no words came out. Her hands gripped the clipboard tighter, as if it was the only thing holding her together. The truth stood firm around her: the farm, the orchard, the history, the law. All of it stronger than her threats. Karen took a shaky breath, her eyes darting between the document and the faces of the neighbors. She opened her mouth, but all that came out was a faint whisper that no one could understand. The clipboard she clung to so tightly slipped in her grip, and a few pages fluttered to the ground. The neighbors began murmuring louder, some shaking their heads, others smirking at the sight. It was clear the power Karen always boasted about was crumbling right in front of them. Her cheeks flushed red, but it was not anger this time, it was shame. The man in the suit folded the deed carefully and placed it back in his case. His expression never changed, calm, steady, almost cold. He looked straight at Karen and said, "You have overstepped for the last time." Karen tried to raise her chin again, tried to summon that sharp tone she always carried. But her voice wavered, thin and unsteady. "I was only trying to protect the community," she muttered. It sounded more like an excuse than a reason. I stepped forward again, standing tall, with the orchard behind me. The scent of apples drifted through the warm air, and the leaves rustled softly in the breeze. "This land does not need your protection," Karen, I said. "It has stood long before you, and it will stand long after." Karen blinked at me, her mouth opening, but no sound coming. Her usual fire was gone, replaced with uncertainty. The neighbors watched her every move, waiting to see if she would push further or finally back down. For the first time, Karen seemed small on this land she had tried to control. The farm stretched wide around us, a living truth she could not erase. And she was beginning to realize the weight of what she had stirred. Karen stood frozen, her fingers twitching against the empty clipboard. Her eyes shifted from one neighbor to the next, searching for someone, anyone to back her up. But the crowd only stared, some with quiet grins, others with folded arms. No one spoke in her defense. The man in the suit clasped his hands behind his back and waited. His calm presence made the silence feel even heavier. Karen fidgeted, clearing her throat as if to break the stillness, but the sound came out thin and weak. "You people do not understand," she finally muttered. "If we allow this farm, then what comes next? More noise, more animals, more trouble." Her words stumbled out, but no one seemed convinced, not even herself. I turned slowly, letting my gaze sweep over the orchard and the barns before settling back on her. "This farm is not trouble, Karen. It is life, it is food, it is history. What you call disorder is the very thing that keeps families strong and children fed." The neighbors nodded, a few whispering their agreement. Karen bit her lip, clearly rattled by their reaction. Her shoulders slumped for just a second before she quickly straightened again, trying to rebuild her pride. The man in the suit finally spoke, his voice steady and low. "The law does not bend to your fears or your personal preferences. This land is protected, and its work will continue. Any further interference from you or your board will carry consequences." Karen's face paled as the words settled over her. She clutched the clipboard tighter, though it no longer seemed to give her any authority. The neighbors looked at her with new eyes. Some with pity, others with quiet satisfaction. I said nothing more. I simply stood there with the orchard behind me, letting the truth of the land speak louder than any argument. And as the leaves rustled above us, Karen finally realized that she was standing in a place she could not control. Karen shifted her weight from one foot to the other, her confidence slipping further with each passing second. The neighbors stayed silent, but their eyes told the story their patience with her had worn thin. The breeze carried the scent of apples stronger now, almost as if the farm itself was reminding everyone who it truly belonged to. Karen finally spoke again, though her voice carried none of its usual bite. "I was only following what I thought was right," she said. Her words fell flat against the stillness. No one moved to agree with her. The man in the suit tilted his head, studying her carefully. "Intentions do not erase actions," he replied. "You tried to dismantle something you did not understand, and now the truth stands before you." Karen looked away, unable to meet his gaze. Her eyes landed on me instead, but she quickly dropped them to the ground. The orchard behind me stretched wide, green and alive, each tree rooted in soil she could never claim. I stepped closer, my voice even but firm. "Karen, you came here thinking you had power over this farm. But this land does not answer to you. It never has, and it never will." The neighbors murmured softly, nodding in agreement. A few of them exchanged knowing looks, as if this was the moment they had been waiting for. Karen pressed her lips together tight, but her hands betrayed her trembling. The clipboard finally slipped from her grasp and landed in the dirt. The sound was small, yet it echoed through the silence, like the final sign of her defeat. Karen stared at it, as though she wanted to reach down and pick it up. But she did not move. She only stood there with empty hands in front of a truth she could not deny. Karen stood stiff, her empty hands shaking slightly at her sides. The clipboard lay in the dust like a broken shield stripped of all authority. The neighbors watched her with steady eyes, some whispering to one another, but no one stepped forward to help her. The man in the suit adjusted his tie and looked over the crowd before returning his gaze to Karen. "You believed you could control this land," he said evenly. "But what you tried to bury only revealed the strength that was already here." Karen swallowed hard, her throat moving as if each word she wanted to speak had turned to stone. Her gaze flicked to the orchard, then to me, and finally to the neighbors. But every direction only showed her the same truth she could not outrun. I let the silence linger before I spoke. "Karen, this farm has endured storms, droughts, and generations of change. It has survived far greater threats than a complaint or a clipboard. And it will keep standing long after this moment has passed." Karen shifted uneasily, her shoulders sagging, though she tried to keep them straight. For once, she had no sharp comeback, no demand, no claim of power. Her voice, when it finally came, was faint, almost a whisper. "I did not know." The neighbors exchanged glances, their expressions a mixture of disbelief and quiet satisfaction. Some smiled slightly, others simply folded their arms and nodded. Karen's words hung in the air, fragile and uncertain, as if even she could not believe she had said them. The man in the suit stepped back, giving her space, but his eyes never left her. "Now you do," he said calmly. "And knowledge comes with responsibility." Karen stood frozen, caught between pride and realization as the weight of those words settled around her. Karen shifted again, her shoes scraping lightly against the gravel path. Her eyes darted to the orchard, then back to the neighbors who stood watching her every move. The usual fire that burned in her voice was gone, replaced by an uneasy silence that clung to her. The man in the suit closed his case with a soft click, the sound sharp in the quiet air. Karen flinched at it, as though it sealed away the last chance she had to argue. Her lips pressed together, thin and pale, her breath uneven. I stepped forward, letting the sunlight fall across my face. "This land does not bend to fear, Karen," I said. "It bends to work, to patience, to hands that care for it year after year. That is what you never understood." Karen blinked, her eyes glassy, though she forced herself not to look away. Her fingers twisted together, restless, betraying the weight she was carrying now. The neighbors remained still, some with arms crossed, others with faint smiles, watching her pride unravel. The man in the suit spoke again, his tone steady like stone. "You came here with threats and demands, but all you found was truth. And truth cannot be removed by a vote or a signature." Karen's shoulders sagged, the fight draining out of her. She whispered almost to herself, I thought I was protecting the community. But the words sounded hollow even to her own ears. The orchard swayed gently in the breeze, as though answering her doubt. The trees stood tall, their branches heavy with fruit, their roots deep and unshaken. They were living proof of everything she had tried to deny. I let the moment linger before speaking again. Karen, the community you say you protect stands right here watching. And they see now who has truly cared for them and who has not. Karen lowered her head slightly, the weight of every eye upon her pressing down harder than any rule she had tried to enforce. Karen's chin trembled, though she fought to keep her head high. Her pride battled with the silence that surrounded her, but the silence was stronger. The neighbors waited still, their eyes locked on her every small movement. The man in the suit stood calm like an anchor in the storm, his presence steady and unshaken. He gave her no escape, only truth, and the truth weighed heavier than her clipboard ever could. Karen's fingers twitched, as if she wanted to reach for the papers on the ground, but she did not move. I stepped closer, my boots pressing into the dirt, with quiet certainty. Karen, you thought this farm was your enemy, I said. But it has done more for these families than your rules ever will. A murmur rose from the crowd, some nodding, some whispering their agreement. Karen's breath quickened, her shoulders tense as though she wanted to argue, but no words would come. Her voice, the weapon she always relied on, had abandoned her completely. The orchard behind me stretched wide and endless, its branches shifting gently in the breeze. The sound of rustling leaves filled the air, stronger than her silence, stronger than her fear. It was as though the land itself spoke the words she could not. The man in the suit finally broke the stillness with a voice that carried like stone. Karen, it is time you understand. Power is not taken by force or noise or fear. True power comes from what endures. Karen's eyes flicked to the orchard once more and lingered there. For the first time, she looked not at me, not at the neighbors, but at the land itself. Her lips parted, but she said nothing, her expression caught between regret and disbelief. Karen stood there with the orchard stretching wide behind me and the neighbors gathered in quiet judgment around her. The weight of everything she had tried to do pressed down heavier than the clipboard, now lying in the dirt. Her voice did not rise again, and her pride no longer held her upright. The man in the suit gave her one last steady look, then turned to me with a nod. His message was clear, his presence no longer needed. The truth had already done its work. Karen bent slowly and picked up her clipboard, her hand shaking. But the papers were crumpled, useless, and she did not even try to smooth them. She hugged them to her chest, as if they were still a shield, though everyone knew they were not. The neighbors began to drift away, murmuring to each other. Some smiled as they passed me, offering quiet nods of respect. Others shook their heads at Karen, their patience for her finally spent. I stood still, watching as she turned on her heel and walked back down the path. Her steps were quick, uneven, almost desperate to escape the place she had tried so hard to control. The orchard swayed in the breeze behind me, alive and unshaken. For the first time, Karen left without a word of victory, without a threat, without a glance back. The truth had ended her fight, and the farm remained standing stronger than ever.